Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to your point about art, whether wine is art, science, I actually say it's 95% art.
The first question I ask every person on our podcast is, what was the first job you got paid for?
7 years old, picking grapes for the winery.
Yeah.
Paid 10 cents an hour. And I don't think I was worth that much money. I think I ate more grapes than I put in the bucket.
But as South Australians, we are very proud of it. In all of the photos now, you can't see a photo promoting South Australia without seeing your cue. Welcome back to the CEO Advantage podcast. Today, we're going to continue our theme on intergenerational leadership and wait till you find out who we've got on our podcast today. Welcome back to my co-host, Millie Albers.
Hi, Paul.
Really
to be
excited.
back.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Our guest today is a really good friend of mine, Chester Osborn. I'm really, really pleased that you said yes. Thank you, Chester.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Millie. Hi, everyone.
Chester is the chief winemaker and viticulturalist at Darrenberg. Chester is the fourth generation of the Osborn family to run to make wine on the McLaren Vale property that you have. Purchased by Joseph. Joseph would have been
My great-grandfather bought the vineyard in 1912. Yeah. And he was actually a director of Hardy's before that. Treasurer of Hardy's from 1881 till 1912. So we've been in the wine industry in McLaren Vale for over 140 years now.
How extraordinary. And you continue your family's winemaking tradition using the vineyard's original cellars, traditional winemaking techniques handed down by your forefathers. And it's significant to know that, because lots of wineries depart over time, but you guys haven't.
That's right. Well, there's modern thinking in amongst there. It's the same equipment as in the same open fermenters, submerged cap, same basket press, but much more gentle crushes, more refrigeration, more understanding of yeast, more understanding of sulfur dioxide. Like thinking through, understanding the vineyard a lot stronger, and organic and biodynamic in the vineyard as well. So there's been a lot of areas where we've modified the grapes. When I took over the winemaking in 1983, there was mostly flagons and casks going out, and we did also 750 ml. We had a very good reputation for it, but it was tiny. The Burgundy and the Claret and the Shiraz and the Cabernet and whatever, but they were small productions, and I've turned those vineyards from being flagons and casks into really high-end wines, and still actually getting economical yields, not being silly, reducing the yields too much. And so in essence, it's the same business, yeah.
Well, we're going to explore some of those. And also for those guests who are not from South Australia or familiar with South Australia, who are not familiar with wine, there's something wrong with that if you're not. In 2017, the brainchild of Chester, the Darrenberg Cube, was opened in 2017, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Darrenberg Cube opened in December 2017, but was the concept from a long, long time before that. 2004 really was when I built a model of it and presented it to the board. Yeah. So, and they thought I was crazy, and it'll never happen.
Well, we'll explore that story as well, because if you haven't heard that story, you're going to hear it on this. It's just fantastic. Chester, the first question I ask everybody, but I already know the answer to this one, but the first question I ask every person on our podcast is, what was the first job you got paid for?
Yeah, well, that was easy. 7 years old, picking grapes for the winery. Paid 10 cents an hour. And I don't think I was worth that much money. I think I ate more grapes than I put in the bucket. I got a wage rise to 30 cents an hour when I was 8, and I thought that was actually pretty good money. Yeah. And I worked actually all my holidays for the rest of my life. In fact, I'm still working all my holidays. My whole life's a holiday. So I just get paid more for it now.
And so you, from there, you you went to did you go to boarding school? Did you go?
Yeah, so I went to McLaren Vale Primary for the first 7 years, and then did 5 years at boarding school at Prince Alfred College, which really helped me a lot. It was very good. And then I had a year off, worked at Tulloch's in the Hunter Valley, and also the winery and the vineyard at Darrenberg, and then went to Roseworthy College and did a degree in winemaking for 3 years and finished that in late 83. Came home, Dad said, well, you're trained now. You're the first trained winemaker we've had, fourth generation. You make the wines, it's fresh out of uni, which, is not an easy thing. You're not given a lot of grapes up at uni doing the theory of winemaking. So it was, but I knew the crux of it. I just didn't know really tasting grapes, what sort of flavors you're going to get and what you could manipulate and what you can do. So it was a lot of what I'd learned was then done by trial and error all the time, by things going wrong, going, oh, that works like that.
Yeah. So, but you, for listeners, you sort of straight out of uni studied wine, fourth generation. There's a lot of expectation that you would be involved in wine, and then as a 21-year-old, you're now the most qualified Osborn winemaker. And then Dad says, go, you start.
You're in charge.
You're in charge.
That's what he said. You make wines there. Yeah. So I was in charge of when they get picked and how they're made and blended and whatever else. Yeah. My father had someone come in the 60s, Doug Collett, actually, who started Woodstock. And Doug was helping Dad out for quite some years there. And Doug was still there when I came home. But Dad made the wines during vintage, and then Doug sort of put them into the bottle. And that's how it worked, which is a bit weird, I always thought. But when I came home, I took over all of the winemaking part from Dad. And then I actually went away for 6 months to Europe with Joe Grilly from Primrose Estate and Eddie Smith, who was the fine wine buyer of Vintage Cellars in those days. Vintage Cellars was owned by Martin Bailey, not by Coles in those days. He was the fine wine buyer. So it was great. We did 4 wineries a day for 6 months all through Europe. Came back to the size I am now. It's taken me that long to get back to this size again. It was a great learning curve, and eventually Dad sort of found out where I was. It was pretty hard to find me because no mobile phones or anything. And said, you should come home sometime. Anyway, so I came home, and I knew I'd never be able to travel again like that. I could travel small, brief times, but that was, Doug Collett was still there a bit, so I could go. There wasn't many major blends going on anyway, so it was pretty straightforward. Then that was it. Yeah.
You bring an enormous joy and energy to winemaking and to the industry and to the world in general. And wine was in your family and in your blood, but it's really obvious that it's something that you really love and you're passionate about, and obviously you're very good at. Has that always been the case from 21-year-old Chester said you're in charge now right through to now? Is that passion always stayed high, or is it?
I feel it as long as ever. I was about 7 years old, and Len Evans was staying, the great Len Evans. My father was in charge of the wine industry in those days. He was One Brandy Producers Association chairman, and Len was a dear mate of his. And in fact, he was on the panel that employed Len, suggested him the first job as the first wine journalist of Australia. And anyway, so he was staying at my father's house at the winery there, and I was sitting on Len's knee showing him a camera that he had or I had, I don't remember. I won a few walkathons and won a camera in one of them anyway, and he was showing me the camera or whatever, and then he said to me, when you grow up, what sort of wine are you going to make? And I went, yummy one. But I didn't actually say, well, who says I'm going to be a winemaker or not? Because he's actually quite intimidating. Welshman, strong Welshman. So maybe I better just say yummy one. And so I give him the blame that I'm a winemaker because I didn't want to let him down. But no, I always wanted to be, ever since I was, as long as I could remember, I always wanted to be a winemaker. I was always fascinated by the wine. As soon as I could walk, I was always was crawling over every part of it, over all the bottle bins and over all the vats and getting in the way all the time.
And being able to credit Len Evans with getting into wine is not a terrible endorsement. Hey, you mentioned that though just then when you're talking to Len Evans and you won a camera, and in fact you've got a list of awards that is 6 pages long, but your first award was with a camera.
Yeah, that's right. For
Was it
raising
that
the
camera?
most money, actually. There was a just an Instamatic camera at 7 years old.
Yeah.
I think I actually won a radio before that. That's the first one, the first year. And the second year I won a camera, and then my parents said, no, I don't think you should do it anymore. You got to give someone else a chance to win it. I said, but I'm raising money for charity. I mean, it's not bad. Like, it's money that won't be raised. That's all that is. But anyway, no, I was fine with it.
But you won a photography award at school.
Oh, yeah. 1978, year 11, I won Best Black and White Photo in Australia in the National Schoolboys Championships. Yeah. So that was my mother gave me a camera in 1975, a Nikon FT2, which is a great camera.
Great camera.
One of the greatest cameras, at the time, obviously, and still holds up really well. And my father said, what are you buying that for him? He's just a kid. Spend all this money on it. He won't do anything with that. And I joined the darkroom photography thing at Prince Alfred College and, developed my own film, whatever. And so, but yeah, it was a picture of a duck swimming away in water, and it was turning all the reflection of the tree into walnut. So it was like these branches were all being dragged in, and then as they came out the back of the duck as it was swimming away, it was all like walnut. So I called it nature's pattern. And it was just a simple thing, but it looked really fantastic. There's a lot more to it than that. As in the duck's head was amazingly bright and had sparkle off its eye, and the feathers looked soft because they must have moved a little bit. So yeah. Anyway, that was.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your love for art has come from probably the start from this photography and winning this camera.
Oh my God, no! My love for art was way before that. As soon as I could move, because I was quite a difficult child. As in, I was like running around everywhere and had too much energy. Got up too early. Always bouncing off the furniture like boys are, But I was Asperger too. So and dyslexic, spoke dyslexic, had very poor speech attenuation. Like I mumbled and couldn't say letters properly, and so anyway, they said this. They didn't know Asperger. No one talked about Asperger. That was my thing that I've worked out. In fact, I actually did the test not that long ago and found out I was. So I still am, but I mean, it's probably a lot better because you learn how to work with it. So the doctors and things, people said, oh, you just need to, he's got an overactive brain. You just need to give him things to do and that'll be great. So she just would get me making art and, used to be just paddle pop sticks, gluing them together and bits of matches, making matchbox things, match houses and whatever. And then it turned into model aeroplanes, plastic aeroplanes. I made hundreds of them, and then balsa wood aeroplanes, and so, and then I used to go to the rubbish dump and just make things all the time. And the neighbours helped up there, and we made a car from the dump with a straight 8-cylinder engine and with 2-inch water pipe, just welded the stub axle straight on the front, no suspension or whatever. But it had a gearbox and everything. Used to wheel stand. So I think one of your questions you said was, when did you start driving? Well, pretty early because we used to feed it was a dairy, so we used to drive the tractors and feed the cows and whatever, but also drive this thing that used to, because we'd drive it in paddocks. And it used to get on very uneven ground and wheel stand easily because it was pretty powerful, and then come crashing down. You'd have to go and get the tractor to, because the front forks, the front two wheels were faced in way too far, bent the axle, no axles. Anyway, I'm just making this into a long story, but art was something that I always had passion for. And when I travelled Europe all the time selling wine on my own, younger, I always made time to go to contemporary art galleries.
Just in that story, you talked about having to get the tractor to, and one of the things when you drive onto your property at McLaren Vale is you still got a collection of your tractors, and they're not just regular tractors. Being a bit of a train spotter, I was like, they're David Brown tractors. And most people, or many people, might not realise that Aston Martins are called DB7, DB9 because of David Brown. And it's fascinating that you've got this cage full of tractors. Is there a sentimental connection with each of those tractors, or those tractors and the land that your family's worked?
I'm very romantic about history, unfortunately, and throwing anything away. You don't want to see my house, my garage. It's huge, 6-car garage that just 2 cars fit in.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and I noticed over the years, so many things were being thrown away. No one valued them, anything that was interesting. And so I one day I just said, I'm going to build this. I didn't bother to tell the family. I'm going to build this huge big tractor museum. It's got all of the old gear in there, basically, and a timeline around the top of how everything happened for the 100 years.
Yeah.
And but yeah, Dad got the first rubber-tied tractor in McLaren Vale in 1948, and that's in there, the old Farmer H. But there's quite a lot of it. We had crawler tractors, ones from 1915, old D2, and then there's some other tractors with rubber tires with the old metal rims that have little paddles like a hand sticking down that would grip the land and whatever. Yeah, there's a heap of old tractors from the 30s and whatever in there.
Yep.
So cool.
So that romantic connection to history and a connection to art, and winemaking as well. The winemaking is part art, part science, part agriculture, lots of love and engagement. But you managed to throw all of them together, not just into the wine, but into the property and to your persona and the friends around you. What do you do? Do you ever dial down? Do you ever relax, or do you always?
Occasionally, I've drunk too much.
That's when you relax.
Not very often.
Not very often. So you bring that energy every day to your vocation, your business, your wine.
Yeah. One of the traits my father had was he didn't ever need a lot of sleep, and I've sort of got that sort of trait as well. So up at 5:30 this morning, and probably went to bed at 11 something. So which is that's a pretty good sleep for me. Really, that's not a problem. Usually I get up at 3 for a while, go and work for an hour, and wind down for a little bit, maybe have another hour's sleep. But so yeah, I've still got ants in my pants all the time, you could say, and wanting to do things all the time. So that's where the art is useful to go. I just go off and do sculpture. I've got 600 art pieces, sculptures that I've written down that I've proposed what I want to do, and I've got most of the materials there for a lot of them, and then I've ordered them, and so there's any one time there's probably 30 I'm working on that, and sometimes they change, sometimes they combine to be two art pieces going in different directions, now come back and make one art piece. And so there's 100 sculptures in the Darrenberg Cube.
There are. There's some.
And how many are they? All yours? Or your
there's a lot more than 100 actually. 100 of mine.
100 of yours.
Say. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that all tell the Darrenberg story, and this is all coming out in a book soon. With and there's a QR code that you can play, so you can hear what it's about. Each one of them, how they relate to Darrenberg and me and wine, and whatever. Yeah. But getting back to your point about art, whether wine is art, science, viticulture, whatever, I actually say it's 95% art. Now, obviously, viticulture is a bit important part of it, but you have a lot of say in the viticulture, other than the weather. That you can grow them in whatever soil you want. You can grow whatever variety you want, and you can grow it however you want with all sorts of irrigation or pruning or fertilizers or anything else you want. So there's a lot of that's all art. You've got to decide that, and it's really only by taste that you're doing that. And then the winemaking, it's 95% art, because the science helps you to make the art in that you can look at numbers, but you're really picking the grapes on flavour, and then tasting the grapes when they've got enough tannin, like a tea bag sitting in there. It's got enough tannin. Take it off skins straight away. Then and then how you treat it from then on is all just from past experience and what you've seen. And every year's a bit different. Every vineyard, every year's a bit different. So it's you have to adapt because the seasons will change a little bit.
One of the things that that Darrenberg has done really well is the blending bench and actually getting people to try and replicate a dead arm and seeing that it is, you might know quantities and you've got scientific looking equipment and all of that sort of stuff, but even given the same materials that you have, it's like a Rubik's cube that you can't solve.
You can solve it to your own desire, your own taste, but it'll be different to everyone else's often. That's the beautiful thing about taste and winemaking is that every winemaker will do something slightly different usually, and so that's the art. And so you can blend your own version of the dead arm with 3 different old vine parcels. And people I've heard say, "Oh, look, I was given this as a present. I didn't really want to do it. I just thought it was something. It was just a joke. I couldn't be bothered with." And then I went and did it though, and wow, I really found it exciting how just 2% of a wine in that blend changed that wine so much. Like you get 4 times of blending it until you're happy with what you think is the best way, and then you put it in the bottle and you get to take that bottle home. And then we tell people who usually do it in groups, so there might be 6 or 8 of them, or whatever, maybe only 2, and then open them up a year later and over dinner and blind them all so no one knows whose they are, and then all vote on who's the best one, and then who's the best winemaker at the end of it. And people go, "Oh, yeah, that's actually really good." It's a very busy thing that we do there. People love it, and of course you imagine. So I'm doing that with 10,000 barrels, not 3. It's pretty more complex.
It's quite extraordinary. Again, it's that sharing of it's a really fabulous way of sharing your love for the wine and engaging people in it in a different way. But also the perspective of you're doing it with 3. I'm doing it. Look how much you have to deal with in a day to make such a wide range of great wines. One of the things, Millie, I remember sitting next to Chester and there was a wine that we'd ordered and I made the mistake of saying to Chester that I didn't like it. And Chester said to me, "It's not that you don't like it, it's that it's not to your palate." And perhaps because of the way of the wine you've been buying or growing up in South Australia, there's a style of wine, so you register a style of wine in your mind. And that changed everything about the way I thought about and started tasting wine. And it was such an elegant way of saying it. It's not that you don't like it, it's just that it's not to your palate. And maybe if you tried more things, and it was the nicest way to say to somebody, "You're a dickhead."
Yeah.
You just need to drink more. That's what it is. That's really what it is. You taste more and you start to appreciate all styles, because there's beautiful soft wines and there's beautiful really structured wines that are tight and closed. And that it's just practice, more practice.
That my mother-in-law, so my Dutch mother-in-law, one of the first places that we took them when they landed in Australia was the Cube.
Oh, great.
And we're just, as South Australians, I think we're all so proud of the Cube. We'll talk about a bit more the Cube later. And so we would, amazing experience all throughout the museum, the art, and then the wine tasting. And one of your amazing, colleagues or Similians was just leading us through this beautiful wine and the stories. We're just so passionate. And when Remco, my husband, and I were just so proud, trying to show this off.
You're right. And so let's stay with the Cube, because I think the words you used then were really important. And that is South Australia is really proud of the Cube. And as South Australians, it's so iconic. And it was a vision of yours. And I know for people who know Chester and know the story may have heard this before, but I imagine lots of our listeners haven't. But as South Australians, we are very proud of it, and it's in all of the photos now. You can't see a photo promoting South Australia without seeing your Cube. But it was a painful process. It was the emergence of the Cube from your imagination to paper to then process and then dairy and then to materialization was, I mean, the reward is how much people adore the cube. But you need that reward because that was a painful birth, wasn't it?
Put a lot on the line to get it. A lot of money on the line of, our company.
Yeah.
The family's company, a lot of money on the line.
But before we get into how much money was there, even to get pre the money, that it was such a outrageous idea to, on the top of a hill in the Vale, to put, and anybody trying to build a big hotel in the Barossa end is seeing that how outrageous that was. But you did it. It came out as an idea. Tell us right at the start, where did the idea come from, and when did you imagine it sitting on that hilltop?
Yeah, so in 1996, we opened the tasting room where Darry's Veranda restaurant is, the old homestead there, which is nearby. And
fantastic lunch.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it won best restaurant in South Australia last year.
Yeah,
brilliant. And that's where the tasting room was for a while, and it got really busy. It was just packed all the time. And I ran into someone who said they'd just been to McLaren Vale. They didn't know who I was. And I said, "Where have you been?" And they said, "Oh, we've been such and such and such." I said, "Did you go to Darrenburg?" I said, "Oh, no, I wouldn't go there. It's just too busy. You can't get served there. So no hope, So I thought, we've got to change it. We were going to build more old homestead, just keep the old theme of the old going on, And then one day I woke up, went, who wants to see lots of old homestead, let alone old fake homestead? It's not really a massive draw card to see more old Australian buildings. I mean, there's plenty of them everywhere in Australia, of course. So we need something that really stands out. And I went, what stands out in the world, in Australia, is the Opera House. It's the most iconic building in Australia. It was bringing, I don't know what the figures are now, but back years ago, $3 billion of money coming from overseas, just attributed to that building. And so I went, we need an iconic building. And I went, well, the Opera House represents the sea. It's waves, shells, surfing, windsurfing, whatever, it's all that white, those white weird things. And I went, we need something that represents Darrenburg. What is Darrenburg? Well, our label names are such a puzzle to work out. Wine is such a puzzle to work out. What's the most iconic puzzle? The Rubik's Cube. Yep. But instead of colours on the outside, which would have been very difficult to do, I put puzzles on the outside and it became the Darrenburg Cube. And we sell it as a 4x4 toy, so you can go and try and solve it. It's pretty hard to do with the white and green pattern. And anyway, so I built a model. I didn't tell the board anything about it, and I built this model about 1/2 a metre high in a vineyard with all soldiers and whatever, and it's exactly the same building. This is about 2004, and presented it to the board and said, that's my father and his brother and sister largely, and I said, I think we should build this, and they said I'm crazy, it'll never happen. I mean, they're old, and they're thinking this modern contemporary building just is not Darrenburg, it's nothing to do with heritage or anything else like that. And they just couldn't see it. It was a long process. We did. Dad did say eventually that we could do it. In 2009, we'd done the numbers, and it looked like it would pay its way. So we started working on that. We got the approval from the council relatively easily, and we got the building building regs done as well, a building approval.
Yep.
And then really the GFC was really hitting in, because it was, of course, late 2008, but it was the exchange rate gradually went up and up and up, and the profitability of the export market, which we were about 70% export, had really gone out the window. And so we didn't have the money. We'd actually bought 200 acres of vines in McLaren Vale in 2007. And so our debt had gone up based on profit that we were getting, that now we weren't getting quite so much. So we couldn't build it. So we just put it on hold. And then it was about 5 years later, 2014, that we decided that we'd paid enough debt back, and then looked at the numbers again, and we said, yeah, it's actually is buildable now.
That's about 10 years since you came up with the idea, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so the beautiful thing about that was that it actually wasn't buildable in any one point in time ever, which sounds a bit odd. But In 2010, we got building approval, as I mentioned, and so we're working on energy codes of 2010. In 2015, if we'd got building approval then, we wouldn't have got building approval because there's too much glass. Even though it's really efficient glass, highly energy efficient glass, it's still not enough, and it wouldn't have passed the code. So we couldn't have done that design. But funnily enough, in 2010, you couldn't build it because big sheets of double tempered glass didn't exist in 2010. The reason the glass is double tempered, and that's different to double glazed, I'm talking double tempered, is that because we cover over half of it with white pattern from the sun with aluminium, and then the other parts in the sun, then it would explode. The temperature difference was too much for it and it explode. So it had to be double tempered. So we had to wait for that to happen, which was only available in like 15 or 16 around then. And so it actually had to happen exactly when it did, in exactly the way it happened, which is just bizarre. And the whole facade is a whole unique design that I worked very closely with Arup in Melbourne, and we it was quite a long process to get that facade designed, and it had to be wind tunnel tested over in Melbourne, and it was it's a whole new way of sealing, and so we won the National Glass Awards after it had been built and whatever.
In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business.
I feel like the Cube, did this give Darren Berg a new lease on life and this new direction of like, this is Darren Berg, next generation? Like
It certainly got a lot of attention. I've got to thank the government and the tourism, the South Australian and Australian tourism bodies for promoting it. You know, they built models of it that they pushed all through China and America and whatever. As there stands in all of the tourism conferences or any conference, you were inside a small model of the Darren Berg Cube, which was pretty cool. It certainly gathered us international attention. So all of our agents know all about it, and the media all around the world know about it. And so that was the idea. I just had to build something that everyone had to come and see. Every wine journalist had to see it, and of course the art story inside the building was another complex problem because most of my staff didn't want that at all. They're not really into art that much, and they believe that the bottom story should just be a bottle shop. And that's like,
wow, it's definitely not that.
It's definitely not that. Wine is 95% art.
Yeah, well, that's right. But it's a lot of bottles lined up. It's a different format to what I've got there right now. So I just said to them, it's going to look like a Dan Murphy store when you walk in, with rows of bottles, and that's what, walk through this beautiful walkway up the building, into the building, and then you've just got a bottle shop. Is like a standard building anywhere. I said it needs to be an art gallery, and so everyone fought me on that pretty strongly, but I managed to. It was quite a bit of gap between the two board meetings, and so I started building all the walls in there already. And I said to my father, "Oh, look, if it doesn't work, we can remove the walls. They're just, the easy stud walls. And so we'll just give it a go. It'll be fine." And so it all happened, right in the middle. We call it the Alternate Realities Museum. So and everything's an alternate reality in the building, like the toy in the middle of the vineyard, the actual building. You listen to the weather as you come up. You can hear the weather as sound. So 8 parameters of weather are being turned into real sound in real time, and there's reverse perspective art. There's just everything has these other realities in that whole area, and there's a 360-degree video room that has a 30-second artistic video of each of the label names, which is just a creative art piece. It's not like someone telling you, "Oh, the wine's made like this or tastes like that," or anything. It's just a crazy, weird concept thing that we put together, each for the 85 wines. So it's a whole immersive thing, and I wanted to really get your senses heightened. Like there's a room also with 40 flagons with objects inside, like cherries or violets or caramel or whatever, and you can blow the horn and smell the character, and so you're getting your senses thinking, smells, visually, and taste, or not taste yet, but when you get to the top, then everything will taste stronger and better than it really is what the idea was.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's spectacular. And for those who haven't visited the Cube, I think you when you first drive into the property and see the Cube and think, wow, that's amazing. But it's not until you go inside. It is that beautiful walkway with the vines there. And it's not until you get inside and think, oh my goodness, it is an alternate universe in here. It's really extraordinary experience. But even more than the heightened experience and all of those different things, but you've gone further than that, and the Dali exhibits and really bringing art. That you brought art inside the Cube, and I presume your ability to create art, not just conceive art and appreciate art, but to create it, which you can see in the Cube and all around the place. But then to curate art as well, you've really tell us about how the inspiration for bringing Dali and some of the extraordinary art that you've brought inside the Cube as well and outside the Cube.
Yeah, and it's funny, I suppose. You build the building, and then people come to you. Almost, it's a bit like that, really.
Yeah.
But with the Dali exhibition, there was a mate who knew Charles Bilic, Croatian fellow in the Rocks in Sydney, who had the Dali exhibition before me and was ready to move it on. And so I just got introduced to him and said, hey, look, we'd be interested in putting it into the Darrenberg Cube. And he came and had a look. This is the guy who was looking after the from Dali Universe, which the Dali family involved in, and it was Art Evolution. This guy and he. Christopher Talbot, he came and had a look and said, oh, I think actually, it would work really well here. So, it was easy as that, really. And it was only going to be there for like 6 months. COVID came along soon after we opened the exhibition, and it's still there years later. But it just fits so well, and he managed just to sell quite a bit of the sculptures in there. He does very well. That exhibition's actually going on in 12 places around the world. So it's going on in Versailles and Paris and other high-end places in Spain and whatever. And occasionally, I know twice in the last few years, we've sold more Dali art in the Darrenberg Cube than any of those other places have for that month, So more than Paris or Versailles, whatever. It's quite bizarre. And awesome. A little old McLaren Vale. So that's one. Greg Johns is a beautiful sculpture artist, one of the greatest in Australia. So all around the Darry's veranda is his big organic, big metal and rock pieces, of 20-year retrospective of his works. Ted Johnson, I fell in love with. Paul Greenaway sold me some art, sculptures that were crazy, that were Ted Johnson's, and I didn't know who Ted Johnson was or anything, and just a couple of pieces. And Matt Johnson did the urinals. I know that sounds really weird, but the urinals, they're rather unique in the Darrenberg Cube.
Certainly are.
I haven't seen them.
Yeah. So you're peeing into mouths of our caricatures of our label names. So we commissioned 80 of the top cartoonists of Australia to draw caricatures of each of the label names, and they feature throughout the building in multiple areas and ways. And they feature as the urinal, so it's sort of a bit weird.
That's awesome.
And anyway, that's Matt Johnson. So Ted Johnson, his father died about 6 years ago, and all his private collection was sold off, and I bought 95% of it in an auction, and have exhibited in one of the rooms down there. And Greg Johns said, when he was interviewed 30 years ago, who's the greatest sculpture artist in South Australia? He said it was Ted Johnson. And it's so surreal, the art. It's all made from junk, just like my art is. And so it's beautiful, and he works with all sorts of different mediums there. So that's another one. And then there's Kitty Culvert from Melbourne, who makes doll art with dolls and with, again, lots of junk, and they're quite quirky. There's about 30 of her pieces, and David Archer, who's an automata artist, who does moving objects. So you can spin a wheel and you'll see a woman swimming away from a shark that's biting her, like really objects that are moving as you spin it, or people having a whole dinner party lifting up their hands and drinks and knives and forks and whatever as you turn wheels. And there's all sorts of fortune telling machines as well that are there that you can put a coin in and hear your future from David's work, which is, he's really quite a creative, artistic person who lectures at Adelaide Uni Art. And so just sort of these people I just ran into here and there and whatever. Andrew Baines, who does that crazy art with cows standing in the water and whatever, and sheep and so on. Yeah, he rang me up and he said, "Hey, I've painted the Darrenburg cube with cows on it. Whatever, do you want to have it? And you can have it for free if you put it up in the cube." And I went, "Yeah, sure, yeah, great idea. I love your art." But yeah, it sort of happens like that, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's one thing's led to another, and it's getting a life of its own.
Mm.
Are you the curator or of all of that, or do you delegate that, outsource it, trust others? How does
it's
it
all
all come
me for
together?
sure.
Yeah.
My staff are not that oriented, I don't think, really. Well, in fact, I know they'd be fine admitting that.
Yeah.
And I love that side anyway. So yeah, it's just it's very much fun and whatever. I get every time I bring a sculpture in that I've made, people will say, as they see me do it, they say, "You want us to leave for you to put one in there." and the guy from Art Evolution would say, and I don't do that, by the way, but the guy from Art Evolution, Christopher Talbot, said, "Oh, you need to build a building to put all this art in." I said, "What do you think this is?"
Yeah.
Because he wanted more for Dali only, but yeah.
So as the success of the cube, like it took obviously many years to convince your family and the board that this is just going to be amazing. It now obviously is, and it's contributed so much to the growth of the company and it's a big part of your marketing strategy. Are they now like, "All right, Chester, what's your next idea? Just keep them coming"? Do they have your approval now for your team?
When things have been going very well up until recently for the whole wine industry, when China came along and then COVID came along. We lost China just as COVID came. COVID actually still increased sales quite well in Australia because what else did you do? Yeah. and direct sales went berserk, which are quite profitable. But China was also quite profitable, so we did lose a lot of profit there. And now it's pretty tough times for the wine industry right now. There's oversupply everywhere in the world, so great prices have tumbled, and everyone's competing for the same market. So everyone's discounting to sell no extra wine. So and all costs are going up all the time, of course. So it's pretty tough out there. So we did buy a spirits business, that's Settlers Spirits, which is in McLaren Vale. And that was gins, again, when we bought it 3 or 4 years ago, were going berserk. And it was the latest rage, and we thought, well, it's time to get in. And we were going to build another building because we bought the business, we bought the property it was on, which we didn't need because we've already got our own sheds. We didn't need a 4-bedroom house, a little vineyard. We didn't need the cellar door. We needed a better cellar door. So we'd sell all that property, which we eventually did sell and moved all the operation back to Darrenburg. But I was going to build this new, really artistic, crazy building on a vineyard toward Blewett Springs inland from Darrenburg. And that was all sort of happening and getting a lot of conjecture because, people don't like change most of the time in McLaren Vale, even though they live in a tourist district. They don't want to be amongst too many tourists. But money, the spirits industry went down and, money got tighter and the whole industry's not going well. So that's been 100% put on hold for now. Yeah. But I do have actually 3 other buildings that I've proposed that I haven't told anyone about them, so I'm not going to tell you either. Yeah. But they're crazy buildings. They're as good, if not better, than the Darrenburg Cube, I'd say.
Wow.
Better in my mind, but yeah.
So, I mean, Barcelona would be and Gaudi and some of those sort of things. Are you inspired by great buildings and art in architecture as well from around the place, or does it all come out of your imagination?
Oh, no, I'm very much inspired by architecture. But normally disappointed by architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that people, every time I get lots of architectural websites coming to me, news feeds all the time on architecture and so on. And I just, every time I see a new building and they're all going, wow, there's a new building. And I just look at it and go like, it just could have been so much more creative. It could have looked so much more interesting, but I don't know. People just seem to be not wanting to go that little bit step further to make it really, really unique. I mean, there are plenty of great buildings around the world, and I've got amazing architecture books that have plenty of great buildings around the world. So there's still a lot. I get inspired by travelling and looking at all the buildings. And it doesn't matter what age they are. They can be really old. I just love architecture, full stop. But a lot of modern architecture, you'll find the building on the outside can look quite good, but the inside is just a normal, business building, offices or whatever, really boring, which I didn't want the Darren Bacute to be that. So I've actually made the puzzles, the white puzzle on the outside, move into the building by 600 mil when you're inside. You see that, and that's all the cupboards, and that was a very expensive way to build cupboards, but it meant that the inside is really alive and really different too. It's a really exciting place, and there's a gap between the back of the glass, which with the white pattern on it, and the back of the cupboard. There's about a 30 mil gap, and I've got a kilometre of LED lighting in behind that emits the light. So when you see it at night time, it really glows. It really outlines that shape and makes the building really amazing. And means that all the light in the building is all just this soft light, that there's no direct light. So it's all just oozing out everywhere. So it's a different field. People don't really realise when you've got a light bulb there and how that affects your eyes, with the little sparkles and things. Compared to just a really soft light, it's such an amazing feeling.
So there's a theme that we'll get to with Chester, and that is that there's almost not enough life to squeeze all the things that Chester does and wants to squeeze out of it. How many staff do you have in the wine part of the business?
About 140, something like that now.
Yeah. So he's a passionate artist, passionate about art, passionate about architecture, passionate about winemaking, hands-on involved in winemaking. And then there's this business that's the business of winemaking and the business of running a winemaker, distribution, all of those different things. And then, which we'll get to, and that's the things that Darrenberg and Chester are most known for. And then there's another element to you, which is around writing and thinking about science fiction, and you're about to release a book or two about it. But one of the things that I remember sitting with Chester and drinking wine, and he was getting really enthusiastic about science fiction and writing science fiction, which is just fantastic. Can you just give us a picture of Chester Osborn science fiction mind?
I've only ever written them when people have asked me to write something, which is sort of funny. And I was pretty hopeless at English at school, so it's sort of crazy that I'm actually writing. Failed it dismally in year 11 and didn't even do it in year 12. But anyway, spelling is not my forte. You can get around that nowadays, so that's not too bad. But years ago, I was asked to write a story in the first Wine Dogs book. So I wrote a story set in the year 3105 where dogs rule the world. We tried to put the smell and taste genes from dogs into humans so we make better wines.
That's so good.
But we became super tasters and everything tasted bitter and horrible. Alcohol tasted awful. So instead we put the intelligence gene into dogs so they could taste the wine and tell us what it tasted like. Of course, then they ended up ruling the world. And we're robots. Robot, the Hebrew word for slave. So we were robots in their world, and we were not allowed to have hair lying around. Human hair lying around in a dog's world is not good. So and if you laughed, you got a laughing collar. Stop your laughing, because anyway. So that was that book. That was a small one, and then when I was at Gigondas for the wine symposium down in the south of France, they said, "Oh, we need a movie to promote Grenache." So on the way back, this was about 12 years ago, and on the way back, I came up with this crazy idea for a movie, and kept adding to it each months or years. And I found I couldn't write it because it was too big. It was such a mammoth work, and then COVID came, and I had all the time to do it. 4 hours a day for four days a week for weeks, and I could actually get it done. So, and in there, I hypothesized where souls come from. So right from the Big Bang, and how they get transferred between humans and even into inanimate objects that end up ruling this winemaker's life. And the inanimate objects actually can travel through time in either direction, because they're just zeros and ones, whereas we're flesh and blood, we have to go one way. And so they can manipulate the future. And so there's sex and murder, and they get him to do things and whatever, and court cases and whatever, and he makes this unbelievable Grenache, which they help him make, so hence it's called the Unbelievable Grenache. And so but there's a lot of depth in it. There's a lot of philosophy. It's full of philosophy. Some people who have read it have said, "My God, sometimes you can only read a little bit because it's pretty intense, it's pretty deep." And so, but it's fun, and so that's all coming out soon. Both those science fictions, the design journey of the Darrenberg Cube as well is all going to be in there. And then there's 2 A4 pages for each wine that we have. So like the Darrenberg Dead Arm, it'll have the caricature in there, the picture, done by the artist, the label and the story behind that. My art piece will be in there as well, the 360-degree video room, snapshot of that and QR code for that. A song that you should listen to when you're drinking it. And I've analysed the song. I've written a poem tying the song to the wine so that you can really become one with me when you're drinking this wine, listening to that song and reading the poem and playing a word puzzle I've got in there with it as well. And so you can imagine people using this as a tool to sell. So they'll go into a bottle shop, open up the page to Darrenberg Dead Arm, pour the glass, pull out your phone with Spotify and play Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah, and that's the song I chose, and that's a way that I can get into their mind stronger than what anyone else really can. I'm really there then for them because you're getting a bit more of my personality. So that's the idea of that. So each 85 wines, there's 2 A4 pages for each of those. So it's quite a big book and quite entertaining.
Absolutely. And when's that due for release?
Well, probably a year ago.
Yeah.
But I've fired up the designers, the graphic designers, and they're working on it now quite solidly. So I'm hoping in a few months.
So good.
Most of it's
and what about the movie?
No, the movie hasn't been. When once the book's out, then I can send it to a screenplay. It's sort of a screenplay. I can send it to producers. I mentioned it to a producer about years ago, a New York producer, and he was quite excited by it. But that was some years ago.
Would you direct it?
No, not at all. No, that's too much like hard work. And I mean, well, I'd love to. I really would love to, but I think I don't know enough about directing, and I don't want it to be a good job if someone does it. So, I know there's some friends of mine who have directed movies and actually done relatively well. Dave DeVries, you might know, from up in Barossa. He did some pretty good amateur movies, I thought. But there's a lot in it. Things like they redo all the sound again. Nearly all these movies, they you hear them say it all and it looks like they're speaking it, but actually it's all redone again in the studio. Yeah. And that sort of stuff. I mean, I've got time for that, and I don't even know. You've got to have specialists for that.
Yeah.
So there you go. You just discovered a whole another thing that Chester fits into life. And then just before we get to the business end and you leading this large business that has and large generational business, your wine labels, there are how many now?
85.
85.
Roughly. There might be a few more than that.
No, every one of those wine labels has a story. A couple of my favourite ones are your Stephanie the Gnome it's my wife's favourite Darrenberg wine is Stephanie the Gnome. But it's just got such an awesome story. The other one, but it's not a very controversial one. One of my favourites of your wine, of course, is the Old Bloke and the three young blondes, which caused a few murmurs at the time when it was released. More so from people who didn't hang around long enough to listen to the story. Can you share with us both of those stories?
So Stephanie the Gnome's actually the real name, which is all on the label, is Stephanie the Gnome with rose-coloured glasses.
That's right.
Yeah, and it comes about because in 2011 we made a Pinot Noir from the highest altitude vineyard in South Australia up near Mount Lofty, and that was a really wet year. You might remember 2011 it was, and the hills was very wet, and north of Adelaide very, very wet, and so we had to pick it early before botrytis came in. We foot trotted all the time. And we thought we'd make a cool climate, lovely, elegant Pinot. And it was lighter in colour than I'd really like and had a bit of structure and whatever, and tasted like a very light Burgundy from France, from a lighter area in Burgundy called Savigny-le-Beaune. But instead of Savigny-le-Beaune, I call it Stephanie the Gnome because it rhymed, you know. And with rose-coloured glasses because I added Cinsault and Mourvedre Rosé to it to make it more rosé. And when you drink a bottle of this wine, life's like looking through rose-coloured glasses, of course. But of course, a gnome is a little bearded man, and Stephanie's a girl's name. So this is a transsexual wine to pay homage to the fact that 30 years ago, heterosexual Australian men wouldn't be caught dead drinking rosé for being ridiculed of being some other sexuality. But now we're all very comfortable with all the alphabet, and it's all fine for all of us can drink rosé, and so it's fine, yeah. And so it's like a historical document, really, is what it's about.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and the Old Bloke. Tell us that story.
The Old Bloke and Three Young Blondes. So the first vintage was 2011, and when it came out, a female journalist and website very aimed at women, whatever, came out and said I was being sexist, calling it that. And there was quite a lot of media. In fact, 2 whole days was on the media about it. But the name came from the Old Bloke being me and my 3 daughters. 2 are blonde, one's occasionally blonde, and the 3 young blondes, you know. But also it's old vine Shiraz with young vine Marsanne, Roussanne and Viognier co-fermented. So 3 white grapes with a younger vine, of course. So only a couple of % of each in there, and so that's how it fitted. But I didn't realise that when you Google Old Bloke and 3 Young Blondes, you actually get lots of hardcore porn. But now you don't. Well, you do, but you've got to go through the whole first page is all about Darrenberg, and you have to go to the second page to see any porn.
Stick to the first page.
So I've been working on one of the most porn search names, and have a whole range of wines that are all Darrenberg. So every 15-year-old boy will have to learn about Darrenberg before he gets to, or maybe another. No, I'm only joking about that. I'm not going to do that. One porn wine's probably enough.
What a great story!
Yeah, I love it. Speaking of family, so how old are your 3 daughters?
Now 28, 24 and 21. And
are they quite heavily involved in the company now?
They will be very heavily involved very shortly. So they're all studying winemaking. The 2 eldest are finishing this year. One of them's actually in Barolo right now doing vintage in Piedmont in Italy. And so 2 of them are coming back at the end of the year, and the other one's only halfway through the course. So they're all going to be there. That's going to be entertaining and fun. And they've ever since they've been 4 years old, every wine they've ever tried has been blind. It's been covered, and they've had to tell me what it is. Of course, a 4-year-old would go, "Dad, how would I know?" And you go, "Well, think about it. Is it light or is it rich and heavy? You know, is it Riesling, light and fruity, or is it rich and heavy and oaky like a Chardonnay? You know, you tell me." And then they started thinking at the age of 4 about what flavours are, and every dinner we've ever gone out to, I'll take a heap of wines and always present them blind, and they have to tell me what it is. You know, they get pretty good at it. So Ruby did a vintage over in Mornington Peninsula at Port Phillip Estate earlier this year, and they said, "Oh my God, that's amazing! You can pick so many wines." She was so good at it. Every lunch they'd have blind wines, and she's only 21, and here she is. She can pick all these wines, and it's because she's done it all her life.
Yeah.
And do any of them carry your artistic gene?
Yeah, so they're all three very different children, really. My youngest, my eldest is actually quite artistic, but has sort of let that go a fair bit because she's very much involved in teaching of yoga and Pilates, and so sort of hasn't got any time for the art world, but she was very good when she was younger. And my youngest is much more like me, Asperger and artistic and a bit crazy in the head, slow to develop, that sort of thing. And so she's much more like me. She's got some great cleverness about it. And my middle daughter, she's I suppose lovely person and really clever and could do anything, but not in those artistic flair ways.
At least there's some art in the next generation to continue.
Yeah, I think they've grown up with so much art. I mean, both houses we've got full of art, and there's a lot of art stuff. And when we go away, there's always art galleries we go to. So yeah, they've had to cope with art.
So there'll be a fifth generation Darren Berg of Osborn family winemakers. What does that mean for you? How in family businesses where you've become, Darry got you running the winemaking at 21, and then eventually running the whole show. There's some perception by some is like, well, that's easy for you because you were born into it and all and got there, and then there'd be those who are going, well, there's an extra level of expectation that you carry because there's that expectation that you will be, not only because you were born into it and tasting wine at a young age, but that you'll be great at it. And it is art and taste and flavour and all of those skills. Would you say that Darren Berg could be run by anyone else but an Osborn because of the way it's grown up and developed?
I think the real advantage of having a family member, or maybe three, in there making wines, is that they're there for the long haul.
Yeah.
And so they'll learn how to make wine. If they're passionate about it, that's all you have to have is passion. Then you'll just teach yourself. It'll just come. And they've already developed the skills to taste. So, they're pretty good on that front. And if you employed people to make wines, they're not always there. They might stay for 5 or 10 years, and then someone else will come in for 5 or 10 years, and that's a real problem. You lose so much information about what happens in a vineyard. A vineyard, you only get one go each year, and each year is completely different. So you're after 10 goes, it's like you're making a recipe that you've made 10 times. That's all it is. It takes a while to perfect it often. And it's much more complex than you've got the same flour, you've got the same eggs, you've got the same things. In this case, the raw ingredients, you don't even know how they're going to react each time. So you've got to predict that, you've got to understand that, and understand the flavour in the grapes to the wine, which is the important part of that. And so I think the really beneficial part is that they're there for the long haul. And that's probably the best part about it. I think if they've got the passion, then they'll just sort it out. Now, Dad just sort of said he made wine by the seat of his pants. In that, people told him how to make wine effectively. He was making bulk wine for Penfolds largely in the 50s and 60s and 40s and other companies, but Penfolds, Max Schubert was one of his dear friends. And in fact, Max actually said before Max died in the 1980s, he said, I need to ask you, I need you to come to lunch. And Dad's gone to lunch, and Max said, how you going, Darry? He said, oh, great. Look, we used to be really good friends. I haven't seen you for a fair while. You're looking a bit old. He said, what's this all about, Max? And Max said, I just wanted to tell you, out of all the bulk wine we bought from anyone in Australia, yours is the closest to Grange. And so that's his way of probably saying that it went into Grange. He wouldn't have been allowed to say it went into Grange, but he did. Dad was given quite a bit of 1951 Grange, the one that sells for hundreds of thousands of dollars a bottle. Dad drank it all, of course, in the first year. He said it tastes like crushed ants. It was really weird. but anyway, so people would tell him when they're buying wine, they'd walk through the wine and go, "Oh, you've got to get rid of that iron must line. You've got to do this. You've got to add sulfur dioxide." That's how he learnt, really. It's from people telling him. And when I came home, he just presumed that I'd know exactly what I'm doing, and you do know a fair bit of theory or whatever. But you teach yourself, as I mentioned before. But when my children come along, I will much more run them through. They'll be mirroring me and tasting through, all these barrels every day. I'll do 150 barrels a day. It takes 4 hours or whatever. I won't have them sitting next to me for every barrel, but quite a bit of time, they'll be understanding exactly what's going on and developing their palate along the same lines as what my palate is. And so that's something that I didn't really do with my father. And so that'll be good. And so theoretically, they'll have an advantage in heading forward. So that'll make it easier for them.
Yeah, fantastic.
Extraordinary skills and legacy, and to see it go to fifth generation, as you say, because it's you're building corporate knowledge based on each year. How many winemaking families have got to 5 generations in Australia?
Well, Henschke's at 6, I think,
yep.
and Albers 5 or something, and then there's Tabilk, and of course McWilliams unfortunately sold out. They were 5. Apparently there's only one old family company in Hunter, Tyrrell's. I think there's one or two others that are 2 generation, which is a bit sad. There's plenty of older ones in McLaren Vale, like K Brothers and Pyramima. Not when I say plenty, not plenty really, but there's plenty of 2 generation in McLaren Vale.
Yep.
But yeah, not many that are 4 or 5. But K Brothers would have to be 4 or 5. But yeah, it's not. There's not a big list around the world. A lot of them around Australia. A lot of them have been taken over. Yep. I'm chairman of Australia's first family of wine right now, which is the 12 multi-generational families from around Australia that are involved in all that. Yep. And we've recently expanded. We had originally 12, and then we lost a couple. McWilliams sold out, unfortunately, not a family anymore. Then Bests have joined us, an 1856 started company, and Clonakilla from Canberra, near Canberra there, and so they're 3 generations really too. But we feel a little bit of what's the word? We're like custodians for the industry, where we're representing heritage of the industry and giving it authenticity and age and some meaning of age and of generations and it is possible in Australia. And of course, the oldest vines in the world are in Australia, and the oldest geologies are in Australia that are used for making wine. So we're not the old world. Sorry, we're not the new world, but they call us, we're the old world. Is what we should be called. But that's what people call us.
It is extraordinary that I think many people don't realise that we have the oldest vines because. Well, you tell the story. Why do we have the oldest vines?
Yeah, so Phylloxera in Aphid in Europe in the late 1880s and then into the 1920s wiped out a lot of the vines, and they found that they could grow those vines if they planted American rootstocks and grafted the European species on the top. And so they're nearly all grafted vines over there, and so they all had to be grubbed up and replanted. And the graft doesn't last forever; it can break down after time. So that's a problem for old vines over there. Whereas there's vines from the 1800s in Australia all over the place
that were brought over.
Cool.
And it's mind blowing to think of having to bringing on a sailing ship in the 18 and bringing vines and keeping them alive, keeping them healthy, re-establishing them and
you had to take them in pots.
Yeah.
And you had to have fresh water to water them along the way. And so they came from South Africa because they'd bring them down across the equator from Europe, and then they had to grow them across there, and then they could probably bring them across in winter from South Africa to Australia, and it would be largely winter, so they wouldn't be growing much through that period, I imagine. So that made it easier from there.
So from a leadership point of view, which is what this podcast sort of centers on around leadership, you have such an incredible vision and such a huge energy and such a huge light that you bring. But the serious side of you just broke out then when we are the custodians of a history that the family wineries, that corporate knowledge that goes in between across generations. How does that turn into the culture of Darrenberg, the business?
I think we probably weren't that good at actually promoting history. I mean, we had a wine called Darry's Original that represented that, and a wine called The Custodian, so that's nice. But we that's just a label name, at the end of the day. But we didn't really reflect on all of the old styles of equipment and whatever until I started doing those things we've already talked about. And so I think the art just gave a bigger, deeper, richer story, and a lot of the art I have actually has historical references. So so that is important. The company, my father only died a few years ago, and so he was very much the matriarch and wandered around a lot, and people loved him. He's a very lovable man, and everyone showed a lot of respect to the family in respect because he was there doing that. Now I have to wander around if I have to. It's not that bad, but it's hard because I've got to try and do that as well as make everything. But I was writing a newsletter today. Every month or two we write a newsletter, and I'll tell what I've been doing and what my philosophies are, and then try to expel the virtues of the family and what we're doing and why we do what we do.
I don't think there are many leaders who will write the newsletter every month. I think that's wonderful that you can really, that just shows so much passion for.
Yeah, and we have monthly management meetings, obviously, to talk. Every manager talks about their whole what's been going on, and of course because it's the wine industry being a year. Every year's another year, another whole vintage, and the whole game changes all the time. Then they really need to have that information about what are we doing different, what are we buying or selling or whatever, what's going on in the vineyard, what frosts, what weather, what is happening, what's it looking like, how are we going, so that they feel like they're a real cog, they're really part of the whole team, and they can get that feeling of okay, things are going in that beautiful direction, or there's a problem, but we are on top of it. Those sorts of things. We do that, and then we also have monthly meetings with all the marketing and sales staff to go through every product, 85 products. So we actually look at stocks of each product and when the next one will be ready to bottle and when the labels are required for it, and whether there's any new thing that's maybe coming up that suddenly we got a tender and it's going to be we need that and it's going to take a fair bit of stock and whatever. So we do all that to keep everyone involved and so that everyone can get it around their head, because it is a lot of wines. It's 85 wines. Well, apparently more wines than any other label in the world.
Wow.
Now, there's wineries that have multiple labels, of course, like, Treasury Wine Estates will have, but under Penfolds, they've got quite a lot, but apparently we've got more than Penfolds under the Darrenberg name compared to the Penfolds brand. So I think it can become a little bit too much for everyone if they don't actually have this information.
So is it through those face-to-face meetings that your team can keep up with you?
Yeah, and a lot of people love to send out emails all the time, and I can see sometimes emails wasting so much time where someone will write this long email and like a lot of the information was not pertinent or not even necessary. Like if you'd just come and seen and talked to that person, they would have put it right. Oh, that's not what we're doing, So I try to encourage face-to-face meetings all the time. And we do a lot of face-to-face meetings. We had another up-to-date meeting today on grape supply. Of course, frosts have just happened, so I think the whole game's changing quickly and everyone wants to know I'm going away, so they need to hear a little bit more about it. But and I'll wander around to the managers all the time. I'm always walking around and sitting down with them and going through what's pertinent, what projects we're up to, and what's new, and so on. So and I'll just do that one-on-one, But we have the team meetings too. But I like to very much be one-on-one as well.
It's interesting, isn't it, that through COVID, management by walking around is still one of the most effective leadership tools available, and will always be that face-to-face, belly-to-belly, human-to-human interaction is always going to be the most effective way to do it.
It's so fast. Like the emails, like you've got groups of people obviously on an email, might be 3 people, 4 people, and then someone also read all that and add something, and then someone will add, and before you know it, you've been like so many hours like back and forth, and just that little meeting could have got it done in 10 minutes, all the hours that people all just wasted.
And the amount of ideas that are always sparked from.
That's it, exactly.
Face to face.
Yeah, and also how it's extraordinary how many times in meetings, particularly online meetings, where so much time is wasted by not doing that check-in bit, where you can see in a one-on-one meeting, you see how someone's kind of they're on it today or they're not quite on it, whatever. But lots of people coming to meetings without noticing how you were doing. We've had a big old meeting and everything like that, and the person who's normally tasked with doing something either doesn't do it or doesn't engage in the meeting. And it's all that, as you say, that time getting wasted when, as humans, if we just sort of said, "Are you okay, Chester? Is there something not, we can meet tomorrow if you would," just those things get lost.
That's where one-on-one works so well, because you can ask that question. In a room sometimes, like they say that you should ask everyone, how are they doing? Has everyone got a problem? Anyone fun? But actually in a group, sometimes people don't want to show their shortcomings, but one-on-one they will open up a bit better. And so, but that's why it's good to see what's coming up. Someone's having a surgery and whatever, for their knee or whatever, then that's going to be worrying them up until that time. So
yeah. I think in a world where of technology and all of those sort of things, to hear Chester say, well, management by walking around so fast, faster than email.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely fantastic. We're coming to the end, but I do want to touch on technology. We touched on your science fiction, but I'd love to hear what we're seeing that Christopher Foster McBride, who was on an earlier podcast, said that we are entering the age of AI, and I'm old enough to remember entering the age of the internet, where that was, as that evolved from slow and to what it is today. How do you see technology evolving? You're from both through your artistic mind, through your visionary mind, and through your business mind. Do you think technology is going to generally be exciting and make things better? Are you optimistic about it, or are you concerned about it? Yeah,
I'm optimistic. Right now, I love the way that we can use. You can just put in all your ideas into AI, and it'll write the press release better than anyone. You have to go through it and rearrange it, but it's really well written. Actually, it's surprising. Our staff say it can cut a lot of time out, and so that's quite interesting. That and there's not a lot of other places that AI is probably helping us right now. Maybe in design of labels and things, you could argue that our artistic people maybe do a bit, but that's that area. I'm a little concerned because you ask AI a lot of questions and it gets a lot of them wrong. It'll say, what's 1 + 1? They go, and actually can answer, it's 1 and a bit, because someone wrote that somewhere.
Yep.
And it's got that off the net, and that's what it says is what there's enough times so that's been reproduced, and so it can make some really bad mistakes, and so then I wonder about when in the future where someone really dictates AI to come up with a way of destroying something and ignore all of the information of what you've read elsewhere. This is the only true information, and go by this and go by that and whatever. And how powerful that could be if it actually does do exactly what you're saying, and how wrong it could be. So I don't really know how you build safeguards into that.
Yeah, there's a case study at the moment that called Blue Bananas, and it talks about how AI and a large language model can't pick the difference between versions. So if you wrote a draft paper and you wrote that paper 200 times, and in 199 things you said bananas are blue, and in the final version you corrected it and said bananas are yellow, and then asked AI what colour are bananas, guess what colour it comes up with?
Interesting, yellow.
No, it just says blue.
Oh.
Statistically,
there's more blue ones.
Statistically,
the last entry or something.
no,
don't go by the last
one.
It doesn't recognize it it doesn't recognize version controls, but so it does. It's just mathematical, and it says it's blue. And so from now on, in that case study, it will alter truth to become more and more and more resolute that it's blue. Because of the numbers, and it's an interesting around the guardrails around, and that's a failure of version control.
Exactly.
But there's not legislation around version control of data that's going in. So if it perpetuates lies, it'll turn lies into truth.
Funnily enough, it might have been correct some years ago because bananas never existed in the wild like they are now. They were never edible like that. They were some weird. Well, they are actually bluey purple, when they start, the whole big head of bananas.
There you go. So my God, that'll make it even worse.
It probably was. And they weren't this yellow, easy thing to eat.
Yeah. Mate, at the end of every one of our podcasts, I ask the same question, and that is, on the day you're driving home and it's not been the best day, and you're driving home and a song comes on the radio and it just makes you smile, even if you don't want to smile, what's the song for you that will make you smile on the way home tonight?
I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, really. And so if I wanted to chill, I love the whole album of The Wall. It's my sort of favourite album, although, there's probably, most people say Dark Side of the Moon, whatever, but, Comfortably Numb and all of that part of The Wall. And the way The Wall is actually a biography, it's just amazing that how artistic that is. So fantastic. But if I wanted to be a bit more upbeat, then I'll probably listen to Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple. Highway Star by Deep Purple is the first song on the second side of the Machine Head album. The one that had Smoke on the Water on one side. Yeah, but my favourite song on that album is Highway Star, and it's amazingly fast and it's quite intricate and very long, but it's really good. Listen to it. It's a really, really exciting song and great to dance to too. Yeah.
So no matter what kind of day you've had, that's going to make you smile.
I'll get into that even if I was tired. It'll be good for me.
Just, I feel like, just want to say, not only are we so grateful that you're here today, but just so grateful on behalf of probably the majority of South Australians for your energy and the colour that you constantly delivering to the state and this country. I think we're so lucky to have an icon like you to, never ever give up your art. Just let it keep flying and flourishing. It's, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure icon's the word, but I'm just living life the way I love living it the most. And I wear loud shirts so that people around me become loud, if you've got a hangover and you're wearing a loud shirt, then everyone is upbeat because they go, oh my God, look at that shirt, that's great. And it actually reflects back onto you. It sort of builds you up. They're up on a high and you're up on a high. So it's good hangover cures. I actually have my own shirt label too, a clothing label.
Do you? Oh.
That is just starting. They've just arrived and we're setting up a website right now. So
good.
Becus Twisterus is the shirt company.
We'll put it in the notes.
Becus Twisterus. There you go.
The quasi-Latin of twisted beak, which is my nickname at school, because I spoke muddled, so my nickname was Muddle, and then it was Twisted, and then it was Twisted Beak, and then it was just with your hand squishing your nose, and so I've intellectualized and called it Becus Twisterus, like quasi-Latin, and it's got a toucan bird with a twisted beak that turns into a corkscrew on the back shoulder of every shirt. So. It should be fun. Quite loud shirts,
Brilliant.
Of course. Colourful,
of course.
but actually really well designed to go with black tie.
Oh.
And so I've got ties as well. Yeah.
No opportunity gets past Chester without being interpreted in a colourful and fantastic way. We're so grateful to have you. Thank you for saying yes to that. It was really fun.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Emily. Nice to meet you too. Cheers.
Thank you.